Thank you, Colt. Thank you. Well, let's get right to it. We got a little extra work that we did today to give you the background info on the Lebanon question. So, what is the Lebanon question? Well, over at the news notes, and yes, I have switched arms here. So, we're on the other side of the planet, and I'm going right hand, left hand sort of thing. But on the news notes, we start things off, and hopefully this is the appropriate way to start. We've got a lot of news to cover, so let me dig right into this. You'll see this on the front page here. War. The Hezbollah defenders in Lebanon responded to an Israeli advance on a hill in southern Lebanon. Now, RT has some great coverage of this. We're going to give you this information, and I want to give you this from the news notes right now. And I actually produced a segment from RT that gives us this information, which is inside the news notes. But here we have Hezbollah MP says Israeli soldiers were killed while trying to expand their occupation. Okay, so supposedly the United States has made an agreement for the government of Israel, which the United States and our tax money funds and weaponizes, which has encroached into the bottom third of Lebanon, which itself is already isolated because the cancerous Zionist state is there and has taken over large portions of most of the Palestinian lands. So the Israelis are the aggressors. Hezbollah is a defense force. And the Israelis, according to the United States agreement on this memorandum of understanding, Article 1 of it says that there will be a ceasefire and the Israeli forces will withdraw and allow for the Lebanon area to be sovereign. That is in Part 1 of the memorandum of understanding. Well, of course, the Israelis have not withdrawn. And not only did they not withdraw, as you can see on the screen there if you're watching, or I'll describe it to you if you're listening to the audio pod afterwards, they tried to advance on a region they've been trying to take for weeks. Hezbollah lawmaker Hassan Fadallah said Israel has not honored the ceasefire. I know, shocker. They have not honored the ceasefire set out in the U.S.-Iran agreement, and that its soldiers, Hezbollah soldiers, Israel soldiers, were killed Thursday on Lebanese soil while trying to, you got it, take a particularly important region of foreign land inside Lebanon. Yeah. So, of course, while soldiers were killed Thursday on Lebanese soil while trying to widen their occupation of the south, Lebanon's national news agency reported. Fadlallah said Israeli forces were trying to push their zone of control toward the Ali al-Tahrir Heights overlooking Nabatea, and that the resistance / Hezbollah was confronting them on Lebanese land. Pretty simple. It's pretty easy to figure this out. He said Hezbollah was exercising its legitimate right to self-defense against Israel, the aggressor and the occupier of part of our land. He said Israel deliberately killed civilians in the south and also struck the Bekaa Valley in order to sabotage the agreement, which includes Lebanon. Absolutely right. So we're going to go back over to the news notes because this starts to unfold like bad origami. Here's a little bit more. Israel confirms battalion commander among 4 soldiers killed in South Lebanon. So Hezbollah responds. They kill 4 Israeli soldiers. And what happens? Israel uses it, of course, as a pretext to then claim we've got to go in and bomb Hezbollah. And by Hezbollah, they mean more innocent people. Of course, as we see in the news notes, this saw Israel engage in new bombing. So we'll see this report coming from the cradle. This Iran-U.S. talks in Geneva are postponed over brutal Israeli attacks on Lebanon. So what happens? Israel orders its soldiers into those heights. They go to take the heights. The Hezbollah guys defend that land, which is in Lebanon. They kill 4 soldiers, and the Israeli government uses our weapons and our tax money to kill more people, and they do this as a pretext. They use this attack this defense by Hezbollah as a pretext. You can see here the start of a 60-day period of technical negotiations between Iran and the U.S. in Geneva was postponed today following a brutal Israeli escalation against South and East Lebanon. I hope this is a good news recap for you, and we're going to hop to the next part of this in a second, but you'll see right here, video footage shows the destruction caused by an Israeli airstrike today that targeted Ann Bourdre in Baalbek, East Lebanon, a short while ago. That's not what I call a ceasefire. How about you? Yes, I know. It's crazy. Those are cool looking hats. All right. Do you like my hat? Are you George Thorogood, man of 1,000 hats? So as you can see here, Suppressed News has this on X. Great news resource from them. Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz again after Israel bombed Lebanon. Yep, of course. The IRGC Navy warns that no vessel should attempt to cross. Why? Now, if this were just say, I don't know, Laura Loomer's show, she would say, Iran broke the deal again, right? If this were Jeff Kooner, he would say, you can't trust Iran. And they would leave off, the first chapter of the book. Hey, I came in halfway through the movie. What's going on? Well, the Iranians are striking back. Oh, so they must have started the whole thing. Yes, they did. You don't have to watch the first part of the movie at all. Iran says the strait will remain closed until Israel withdraws from Lebanon, which is in part 1 of the MoU. The naval blockade is fully lifted by the U.S., and U.S. forces leave the Persian Gulf and the region. And yes, they have shown Donald Trump that they have the power to control the strait because it is theirs and Omani waters. The IRGC is broadcasting a warning on maritime frequencies. Quote, the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until these conditions are met. Any vessel that defies this directive will be targeted. The move comes after Israel's strikes on southern Lebanon and Israel's refusal to withdraw from Lebanese territory. Yes, indeed. So there you go. Sounds kind of like Empire Strikes Back with the Imperial drone. Remember that? That was pretty cool. Now, let me show you some of the terrible things that happened there. This is one of the effects of the Israelis attacking. At least 30 civilians have been killed since midnight in a wave of Israeli destruction and attacks across southern Lebanon. And here's a picture of one entire family wiped out. You got it. The Press TV correspondent said more than 25 residential sites were hit by airstrikes, drone attacks, and artillery fire, with the Nabatea area bearing the brunt of the attacks. He also reported new strikes on Zebdin and Duer as fighting and Israeli military operations continue. These are some of the people who were killed overnight. Yeah. So death toll among Lebanese civilians reached 30 in less than a day. 30 in less than a day during a ceasefire, because we all know that every ceasefire that Israel has agreed to, they've broken, just like the United States with the great treaties they had with the native Indian Americans. DD Geopolitics has more than 150 Israeli airstrikes is the number on Lebanon since midnight. And when they had done the count, they had at least 20 civilians killed, and that was added to by another 10. But here's what some of this terrible stuff looked like, just to give you an idea. There we go, unfortunately. There you go. Since the supposed ceasefire took effect, Israeli forces have targeted 11 towns and villages in southern Lebanon, many struck multiple times. 150 Israeli airstrikes. Now, is that at all in line with a ceasefire? And so, if we think about Donald Trump's rhetoric, will the action match the rhetoric? Will they conform to the U.S. Constitution and stop sending weapons and money to Israel? No, of course they won't. Of course they won't. They'll talk a good game and they'll continue sending weapons. And it's just part of a big shadow play That's all, just to get them to the next elections. That's all this is about. Israel's security minister, well, he's already explicitly stated this, and this runs contrary to X rules, by the way, but X is allowing it to stay out there. Mario Nafal pointed that out about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So I've got this, but let me read you this comment first. Dropsite's got this. Israel's far-right national security minister, and this is another message to the Trump administration, Lindsey Graham, and all the other DC goons in the swamp down there who want to continue sending weapons to these people without any declared war or anything, calling them allies. Well, here's this. Israel's far-right national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is wanted by the ICJ, by the way, responds to Vice President J.D. Vance. For every tear shed by an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers should cry. All of Lebanon should burn. So again, who's initiating the aggression? Is it Lebanon and Hezbollah, or is it Israel? Which side has consistently initiated the aggression? Which side is the artificial imposition in the area? That would be the Zionist artificial state. They're all artificial states, but this one, when you look at the state-to-state relationships, is very clearly occupying other people's land. He writes, this is more from the wanted war criminal, with all due respect to the Americans, Israel must make it clear to the entire world that the blood of our sons and the security of our citizens are not up for grabs. Unless, of course, you're very well aware that Hamas is planning an insurgent attack on military targets on October 7th, 2023, and you intentionally pull soldiers away and delay any response, and then you use Apache helicopters to kill civilians and then claim it was the other side. You know, the blood of your civilians and your sons and daughters evidently is not that important then, is it? Because it all works for a narrative to allow you to just begin ramping up your genocide. Anyway, all of Lebanon should burn, he says. All of Lebanon should burn. Our highest duty is to protect Israel's citizens and IDF soldiers, and that commitment comes before any other consideration. So again, he explicitly said all of Lebanon should burn. So I noted a little something like this. Not that he's going to read it, but I thought perhaps maybe it would be worth actually spending some seconds to write this, just for the record. Imperial mindsets rule that occupation genocide machine. This man is explicit about his intentions, even on the already visible unconstitutional U.S.-Israeli arms, tech, intel, and money parasitism level. This might show some of the DC swamp heads that they arm genocide when dealing with a nation, I should say, that has as its security minister a man intent on mass murder. That is their security minister, explicitly stating that. And thank you, Anti-War. Anti-War reposted that. I appreciate that. So it got a little bit more coverage. I do think, much like Don Jeffries, I do think that despite the number of people that follow me, I think that there is a little suppression going on. I haven't been able to test it. And of course, leave it to U.S. Intel to tell us the sky is blue. Hey, look, U.S. Intel says Israel will torch the MoU. And of course, the next stunner coming from them is the sky is blue. I think it was Larry Johnson said, oh, yes, breaking news, the sun rises in the east. So here's Ryan Rosbiani. He says, I've been saying this for weeks. U.S. intelligence warns Netanyahu will torch the Iran deal. Thank you. But that is a signal telling us that there are figures within U.S. Intel, of course, who are starting to push back on this. Now, my question to you is this, okay? Because I think that there's a double bluff going on here. I think that this entire thing with J.D. Vance and Donald Trump making it look like they're upsetting Israel and all these things is a setup for the summertime prep for the fall elections. That's all I think this is. I don't think they're sincere about it in any way whatsoever. I really think that they honestly, Trump doesn't care. And also, I don't think that Trump really cares about the energy situation. Because if he had really cared about the energy situation, he wouldn't have undertaken this. He's not stupid. He's got a brain. He's got to have known, and he had to have been told. And even if he wasn't told, the minute Iran imposed their embargo and took over the strait as they can, he should have known then. And we already know that he imposed restrictions on Russian energy and high tariffs. So we already know that he's completely closed off to any sensibility of care about his actions and the effect that they will have on your price of living. Now, the question is whether or not that washover into the political elections would be important to him, or if there are other factors that are more important to him. And I can't speculate as to what those are. Some people say Epstein stuff. Some people say just because of the Adelsons and the money, or direct links to trying to get deals to build and things like that. I don't know. I just don't know. But he has been callous and completely blind to, obviously, the truck that is coming right through that tunnel at us. I mean, this is like Dennis Weaver in Duel. When you see the thing coming barreling down behind you, it's going to hit you. It's going to hit you right in the rear of that little Dodge Dart. Or I think it was a Plymouth Valiant. Yeah, it was a Valiant, because it was supposed to be the Valiant for him. So I'd love to get your speculation. We're going to check in at Rumble in just a second. And of course, here is the way things broke apart today as RT had it covered.
A round of direct talks between the US and Iran has been cancelled at the last minute in Switzerland. Their so-called Memorandum of Understanding, aimed at finalising a deal to end the war within 60 days, had just been signed on Wednesday, and the clock remains ticking. RT's Yasin Ekin and many other journalists are in the European country, reporting on negotiations that aren't happening.
It seems that the Swiss Foreign Ministry did essentially inform us that the talks are off, but this came just a day after the Swiss Foreign Ministry reassured us that the talks were ongoing, despite statements from the United States and Iran suggesting that their delegations would not be arriving in Switzerland. And all of this came off the back of reports and statements from the United States and Iranian officials. The U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said that they delayed their visit, citing concerns over technical and logistical reasons. The Iranian side was less vague when they said that they're not sending their delegation because of Israel's strikes against Lebanon. And this has been a precursor for many and all potential talks between the United States.
All right, so I want to pause it there. So again, who's being honest with you? The Iranians are being honest, and J.D. Vance is using circumlocution, right? Very clearly. People talking in the Rumble chat about being able to read faces and things like that. Absolutely true. And Donald Trump showing that he doesn't care. We'll continue.
And Iran. And let's not forget, the U.S. President Donald J. Trump, not so long ago, said that he had concerns over the future of the agreement, or at least the finalized deal between the United States and Iran, because of Israel's attacks against Lebanon. But while all of this is happening naturally, we also understand that there is a 60-day period that will ensure that the two sides, to a degree, come to an agreement, and the clock is ticking. But Iran's presidential media advisor says that it's just as crucial to ensure that an agreement is reached, but more importantly, how it's done.
This is just an agreement on the end of the war, nothing more. That means everything has returned to the pre-war status quo and nothing beyond that. Although both sides have committed to reaching another agreement on nuclear issues and sanctions relief within 60 days, beyond that, it holds no further value.
Speaking exclusively to RT, the advisor does go into a little bit of information, but let's not forget that the task at hand is definitely a difficult one, because the first point of the memorandum was to end the war between the United States and Iran. That was, of course, significant. And after that followed, of course, another important part, one that Iran has persistently tried to essentially tell the United States, hey, stay away from my internal affairs. And that is also a part of the memorandum. And let's not forget that the internal affairs of Iran was used as a pretext to justify the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. So that is that is again another important thing. But of course, we have a long list pertaining to nuclear agreements between Iran and the United States and the International Atomic Energy Agency, as well as the reconstruction of Iran. Some $300 billion are expected to go to Iran, and the U.S. president has said that none of that money, not even a single cent, he said, will be paid by the United States, suggesting that incentives, investment opportunities will make its way and it will reach that sum. Of course, the sanctions against Iran will also be lifted. Any and all restrictions or sanctions that have been applied by way of the UN Security Council or unilaterally implemented by the United States. And again, it's a long list that continues. Of course, the Strait of Hormuz is another topic of contention. The strait will, generally speaking, be open. But more importantly, the unilaterally declared blockade by the United States will also be removed and withdrawn. The security guarantees will be implemented by Iran and regional neighboring countries to ensure the safe passage of commercial vessels. But most importantly, the status quo will remain in place, suggesting that the United States will not impose any new sanctions against Iran over nuclear issues until an agreement is reached. But again, this is another matter of contention because this has been years in the making. Iran has been trying to negotiate with the United States for years. Iran has been trying to negotiate with the European Union for years. But despite that, Iran has been attacked every time it decided to sit at the negotiating table. But what we're looking at right now is a time frame of 60 days. And if the two sides agree, that time frame or that time limit could be extended. And depending on how things progress, that just may be necessary.
Oil prices are on the up again, with Brent crude surging to $80 a barrel on Friday morning amid the cancelled Swiss talks. The American president, though, was swift to dismiss the financial hit for citizens.
I do want to say, though, the stock market just hit a new all-time high. The 401ks just hit a new all-time high. And oil is dropping like a rock. Other than that, it's another day in paradise.
Well, while Washington is hailing the US-Iran signing as a victory, Israel's government seems to think of it as a defeat, particularly the part where it says allies must stop all attacks too. The IDF has, irregardless, launched new strikes on its neighbor as the country's security minister calls for, quote, all of Lebanon to burn. Our Middle East correspondent, Charlotte Dubinsky, has more.
Complete shock. Let's not forget, just a few days ago, we had senior US officials closely linked to the White House giving briefings in which they were saying that Lebanon was not part of this deal, despite the fact that Tehran was insistent that it was. Now we have this published memorandum of understanding, and it seems that those US officials were essentially lying through their teeth. Israel finding that out with the rest of the world. And it is pretty incredible that a deal that Israel has not been privy to, it was not part of, has essentially been laid out by the US as in, you will now follow this. Israel also pretty shocked by the fact that it seems to them that this has been a pretty successful shopping trip for Iran. The nuclear program, well, that stays the status quo intact. Ballistic missiles, Iran gets to keep those as well. And let's not forget, when the US and Israel launched this war against Iran all the way back in February, these were things that both sides said that they were looking to completely get rid of. The public in Israel just dumbfounded. In fact, a new poll showing that 71% of respondents now think Donald Trump, the man who we've heard over and over as Israel's best friend, he's the best guy in the White House ever for Israel, is somebody that they no longer trust with Israel's interest. Vance on Thursday night also talked about perhaps that Israel should be a little bit more grateful for the deal. Then he made an outrageous threat, at least that's how it's being perceived here in Israel. He said to Israel that it should remember that something like 2/3 of its defensive weaponry is manufactured in the US. And when it came to that direct criticism of those ministers, we're talking about Ben-Gvir and Smotrich here, he turned around and said, well, what are you guys proposing? Take a listen to this.
You've seen people in their system, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who've attacked the deal. And I guess my response to them would be, what is your exact proposal? And, you're a country of 9 million people. You can't just kill your way out of solving every single national security problem that you have.
Now, I want to pause it there, everybody, because as I did last night, that just rings incredibly hollow to me because, again, see, this is where these are indications to me that this is just pretend. This is all play acting for them. And I have a feeling that on the other side in Israel, they're well aware of this and that they're working with each other on this. because he could have said that ages ago about Gaza, right? I mean, how many times did they tell us that Hamas is a terrorist group? How many times did they go after people on college campuses who were merely calling for peace, supporting Hamas, which the United States helped set up as the political leadership inside Gaza? And the United States and Benjamin Netanyahu made sure that the leadership, which they housed in Qatar, got millions of dollars. And then they're calling them terrorists, right? Just like they work with all these other so-called terrorist groups that they create, they invent, and then they paint them as terrorists, but then they work with them, just like Al-Sharaa, Al-Jalani, the Al-Nusra Front, ISIS, all these groups, Al-Qaeda. So the fact that they were willing to do that and then continue to allow Israel to blast innocent people to a degree which we in our generation, my generation, have never seen before, ever. It's just so stark. And even with Nazi Germany, the level of destruction and actual pulverization was only seen in places like Dresden, the firebombing there, or in World War II with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Carpet bombing is the only thing you can think of, and it was happening daily in Gaza. So how is it that he can say that statement now and mean it when he could have said it starting October 2023? Is it just that he has a different opinion about Hamas? Well, if he has a different opinion about Hamas, how does that comport with the United States supporting Hamas and Benjamin Netanyahu supporting Hamas, and he having to know that, but continually calling Hamas a terrorist group? None of this stuff jives. It's all bogus. It just doesn't pass any sort of smell test. It's rancid meat. And also, over at the Rumble chat, I want to go over there and say hi to everybody because you got some great thoughts over there. So let's head on in there and say hi. So over on the screen, I'm going to scroll up just a little bit here because we've got this right in here. Harry Hart says, no deal until Israel is gone. I saw that a little bit earlier, Harry. Absolutely. Yep. And then a little bit further down, Birdhouse says major diplomatic rift as Italy cancels next week's U.S. trip after Trump claimed PM Meloni begged for a G7 photo. Meloni fired back in a video slamming the fabrication. Neither I nor Italy ever beg. Good for her. Trump is just, he doesn't know when to shut up, that guy, you know? He doesn't care. He doesn't care. Then we've got this. Front Porch Media says Trump is holding the dump Israel card now, but I'm doubtful that it will be laid down on the table. Yeah, and I think it's just something that they're pulling out of their sleeves. Let's see. One more real quick down here. Let's see. Major diplomatic. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Birdhouse. Yeah, I saw that. And think I've got this. Oh, okay. Tony Garrett says, if nukes are just a reason for those that have them to maintain their arsenal, the so to it just cause to seek your own. If you got a gun, then I want a gun. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, it makes sense that, I'm surprised that Iran has not more explicitly said, hey, you're driving us to head towards trying to actually get a nuclear weapon, but we're still not going to do it. They've been very, very careful not to even put that out there. So that's pretty impressive. Then, of course, we have the reporting from Larry Johnson and others who said that they can get access to a nuclear weapon, which I think very clearly they could. There is more here, and this goes into the actual daily occurrence today, the events of the day that led to the Hezbollah forces fighting back. So here's a little bit more from RT as they describe to you what happened when the Israelis tried to take this land.
Israel wants to stand very firm on its red lines, particularly when it comes to Lebanon. And of course, that will be potentially a big issue for this deal that the US and Iran has thrashed out, because for Iran, Lebanon is a key component. Ending the war there, key to ending the war across the Middle East. Now, this, of course, comes as Israel and Hezbollah have been trading more barbs overnight, with severe consequences for Israel. 4 soldiers killed in a Hezbollah drone attack in the south of Lebanon, and several reservists were also injured in another drone attack. The IDF responding to that, hitting targets throughout southern Lebanon and even hitting up as far as the Bekaa Valley. The IDF saying that it was targeting terrorist infrastructure linked to Hezbollah. Lebanese media saying more than a dozen people killed in those strikes, including civilians. Now, publicly, we have not...
So I just want to let you know, they're all civilians. They're all civilians. The Hezbollah fighters, I haven't seen that they actually officially acknowledged Hezbollah fighters getting killed. As far as I know, it was all civilians, 30.
Heard really anything from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and there could be a very good reason for this. There is a suggestion that he still thinks that this deal between the US and Iran could still all collapse, all fall apart. And in the meantime, he wants to refrain from poking the bear. He wants to refrain from angering Donald.
So he's not speaking. He's killing people. So he is poking the bear. So I have to disagree with her there. He's taking actions and doesn't have to speak. Why speak when you can kill people?
Trump even more. And as we get that news that those talks in Switzerland between the US and Iran and that signing ceremony seems to be cancelled, postponed, annulled, whatever you want to describe it as, it could be that he's hoping that those wishes will soon bear fruit.
Well, let's discuss the situation now with journalist and commentator Mohammed Shamsuddin joining us live from the Lebanese capital. You're most welcome. Just a news line that we're starting with, Mohammed, that's just coming into us on the program. We are hearing reports that Israel and Hezbollah have agreed to a ceasefire, which is due to start apparently at 4 p.m. local time, which would be now. If that is engaged, if that is true, has that happened?
Well, this is not the first time that there have been an announcement of a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. As always, after the ceasefire goes into effect, Israel strikes South Lebanon or strikes in Lebanon in January. They just implemented 2 strikes in South Lebanon. They were heavy strikes, actually. Our friends in the South are reporting very heavy strikes that happen there right now. So as always, Hezbollah agrees to the ceasefire. He says, I will not attack Israel. I will not attack Israeli soldiers. And Israel breaks the deal and breaks the ceasefire again. This has been the norm right now. This has been a repeated scenario, a repeated movie that we are seeing over and over and over again. Even though the strike that Israel struck in Bekaa today in Lebanon, this happened because of a retaliation, as what Israel calls, against Hezbollah attacking its soldiers in South Lebanon. Well, Hezbollah did not attack stationary soldiers in South Lebanon. Hezbollah was defending a strategic hill called Ali At-Tahir. This hill Israel has been trying to take from the beginning of the war. When Israeli troops advanced to this hill, Hezbollah struck them. So now Israel is saying that they are retaliating against Hezbollah, but in actuality, Hezbollah was just defending this hill as they should. You are trying to occupy a land, so Israel expects that no one will defend this land.
Exactly. And just to let you know, that 4 o'clock deadline, according to the BBC, I've got screen 2 open here. I can't show it on the screen right now, but according to the BBC, Israel has been launching more airstrikes after that 4 p.m. deadline. So Netanyahu is doing everything he can, as most of us knew he would, to try to make sure that this doesn't hold at all. So there you go. Now, I want to give you some other items here that I think are pretty important as far as the news notes goes. I thought that man gave a pretty clear and succinct explanation of it. And now let's go to Mario Newfall. He says, the Iranian foreign minister Arachki says Israel's minister Ben-Gvir is a genocidal lunatic. He calls him a lunatic after Ben-Gvir posted that post about for every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep, all of Lebanon must burn. Arachki called the Israeli regime a genocidal death cult. Absolutely right. And here's a little reminder. Itamar Ben-Gvir is wanted by the ICC as well as Mr. Smotrich and Mr. Strzok. They are all wanted. And so is Benjamin Netanyahu. And here's some more. Despite the fact that Trump had to cave to the solid demands of Iran, Trump claims nothing limits his power. Yeah, classy. Trump claims, quote, there are no limits on his power, says RT in their report. Yeah, there are no limits, he says. Oh, well, I guess not. He says there are no limits. I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but there are no limits, he said. We defeated them totally, militarily, which is why, of course, Donald Trump is giving them a better deal than they had with the joint JCPOA. And I want to show you this, just getting distracted by this just drop site piece, Iran and Oman. This is very important. The newly established Persian Gulf Strait Authority, PGSA, has announced that vessels seeking to cross the Strait of Hormuz must submit transit requests at least 48 hours in advance and coordinate designated routes and passage times. During the 60-day Memorandum of Understanding period, Iran says security, safety, environmental service fees, and related insurance costs will be covered by the Iranian government, indicating Iran plans to institute those costs at the end of the period. Now, I want to just mention this because where things stand as I do the stream with you here is I've heard two conflicting things, and these are going to have a bearing on the price of gas at the pump the next couple days, what's going to be happening in August, what's going to happen in September, and of course, as the elections come along. Now, Donald Trump suddenly, despite the fact that his acolytes for over 2 months were telling us that everything was fine with the U.S. oil situation, Donald Trump just this week admitted, in 4 weeks, we would have been in a lot of trouble at the bottom of the barrel. So evidently, we're not going to be hearing Kevin Hassett saying that nonsense this coming week, as he continually did over and over. We won't hear Scott Bessent say that stupid stuff, right? We won't hear the energy secretary say that nonsense either. Well, that's good. That's a good thing. The problem is that Donald Trump should have known that early on. And as we said, he doesn't seem to care. And so my big question is Iran shutting down the strait? The last I heard, they are. And that this arrangement that they announced earlier today, which was going to be their arrangement, is no longer extant because of Israel's attacks. Yep. Now, where do things stand at the moment to wrap this up? As of 5 p.m., we see unconfirmed reports that Israel is going to stop firing. The judge and his Intel Roundtable team are skeptical. And I want to show you another segment that rolls after they get this news.
Piece that you showed during Professor Mearsheimer about the so-called truce or ceasefire. Here, Israel, Hezbollah agree to ceasefire starting Friday. That's today. U.S. official. Now, this has not been confirmed by anybody in Israel and not been confirmed by anybody in Hezbollah. Ray McGovern, is this credible?
Well, no, it's not. The more so since the report of Marco Rubio talking to the senior officials in Lebanon says, look, we're going to insist on bilateral talks here between Israel and Lebanon, and we're going to facilitate them on the 25th, the 23rd to the 25th. That's several days from now. So I don't see anything happening until then. And even then, it's going to be a hard slog to get the Israelis to back off, because, as we've already said, the majority of the population is really gung-ho to keep the pressure on Lebanon, Hezbollah, and others.
Chris, watch this, guys. Chris, cut number 12.
Bibi Netanyahu worked well with me, but he will tell you, we're the ones with the guns, we're the ones with the whole deal, we're the ones with the B-2 bombers, etc. If it weren't for Donald Trump, Israel would have been eviscerated.
Your relationship with Netanyahu's...
It's good, but we have to keep him a little bit sane.
Are you going to be able to...
Are you scratching your head? So first he says Israel would have been eviscerated. By whom? Israel has nuclear weapons. They got them through subterfuge. They're not open to inspections. The Iranians weren't developing nuclear weapons. They were open to inspections. Trump tore up the deal. Iran still held to the JCPOA for another year under the 4% enrichment threshold. And then they only advanced it, as we learned, in order to give themselves negotiating room, which is exactly what they've gotten. Trump is correct in saying we give them everything. We give them the weapons. We give them all this stuff. Right. And what have they done with it, Donald? They've committed genocide. What have you done? You've committed war crimes and facilitated genocide in many areas of the globe. And then to say that they're kind of crazy, they're somehow the reckless ones. And yet, what have you been doing? They were engaging in all that activity before this in Lebanon. And now suddenly you don't want them blowing up buildings in Lebanon. Again, this selective memory is very, very troubling. And it's not as if he has cognitive problems that don't allow him to see what was going on in Gaza. He's just not talking about it. He's trying to steer it towards the immediate discussion about Iran, about Lebanon, about Israel, because he's pressed into it because of the energy situation and the elections. And I think he's doing everything he can to allow it to look like the United States is trying to work with Iran, and then make it look like the Israelis are difficult to work with, which gives him some space to keep the Republicans and the pro-Zionists in charge in Washington after the elections in November, and then everything will go right back. And whoever, Netanyahu, or if it's Itamar Bennett, whoever it might be, they will ramp it up in Lebanon and they'll take over the rest of Gaza. I think that's, it's very clearly that's their long-term plan. I don't think one has to be some sort of a conspiracy theorist about that. And even though this is called the Liberty Conspiracy, we're a conspiracy for freedom. We'll continue with a little more of this nonsense from Trump.
Control Israel from attacking Lebanon.
Yeah, I will be. I mean, I wonder. They have a lot of respect for me, and they do as I say.
Will Israel do what Donald Trump says? I mean, this is just mind-boggling, Larry.
Yeah, well, look, Trump has the power. I mean, we really do. We do have the leverage. The question is, will Donald Trump use it? And he might. I must say, I don't know about Ray, I was really shocked by some of the things he said this week in admitting that, Israel's really going too far and bombing, blowing up apartment buildings just to get one guy. And that kind of thing. I thought, holy smokes. So there's hope. I mean, this wouldn't be the first time, David Eisenhower forced the Israelis and the Brits and the French out of the Suez Canal. Ronald Reagan told the Israelis to get the hell out of Lebanon back in 1982. So, Trump could be continuing a tradition that from time to time he can threaten. We're going to withdraw not only our aircraft, we're going to withdraw Patriots, we're going to withdraw THAADs, the air defense system that we've provided to you, and we're going to put a hold on all shipments of further weapons going to you if you want to persist. If you want to do this on your own, do it on your own, but you're not going to do it with our stuff. If he played that kind of hardball, yeah, he could force a change.
Ray, we have often talked about, and none of the three of us are mental health professionals, the president's mental stability. And before you opine on it, watch this. Chris, number 14.
You had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And, well, the MoU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
I think so.
I mean, we went from unconditional surrender to tell me what you want, guys. And now he claims it's still unconditional surrender.
Judge, I was afraid you were going to show the video of him trying to put the Medal of Honor around an Army officer. That's the one to look at. He couldn't tie the bow. It took him a minute or so to figure out how to make it stick, and then turned around and, I mean, he is ill. We've been saying that. I've been saying that for 6 months now. So this is big. Now, I want to say that I agree with Larry about some of the things he said about Israel, bombing a whole apartment building just because one suspected terrorist went in the entrance. Even more is what Vance has been saying, really frontal. Okay, so it's really a matter of existential thing for Netanyahu, and he's not faced this kind of frontal assault.
So I'll just pause it there because, again, I think this is completely performative. There's been no substantive change for the United States at all. In fact, I think if you look at what Netanyahu is trying to do with the NDAA, now Section 219, and the Senate Intelligence Authorization Act with Senator Tom Cotton, and what they're doing with those things, I think it's very clear that Netanyahu and Trump and J.D. Vance know that public sentiment in the United States is turning away from Iran. They're going to utilize that to bolster Trump and J.D. Vance and the Trumpers in there. And for a temporary period this summer, it's going to look like there's a schism when substantively, policy-wise and weapons-wise, there's not going to be any change. The real key and that the hinge of this is how much pressure Donald Trump is going to get from various politicians in Washington, state governors, and others whose livelihoods and their economies they recognize as being in big trouble, which could turn the tide temporarily against the United States continuing to funnel weapons into Israel during this time period. There might be a temporary period when Israel does lay off Lebanon, and so that would allow for some sort of oil prices to drop. And again, that I think is only going to happen once Israel takes the land they want to take south of the Litani River. I think that's where they're going to try to call it a day at that point, and then they'll negotiate and negotiate and negotiate and get nowhere to actually get Israel to pull out of there. Now, then you've got to ask, or one might want to ask, what is Hezbollah's response going to be? Well, I think the Israelis and the Americans both anticipate that as chess players, and they know that if Hezbollah pushes back on any sort of Israeli occupation, people won't notice the Israeli occupation as much. They'll be focused on, through PR media, through Laura Lumerites, on Hezbollah pushing back to try to get them out in that occupation south of the Litani River. So I think the setup for the fall is that they're going to try to make it look like there's this conflict between Israel, Netanyahu, and J.D. Vance and Trump. Then Netanyahu's going to take as much land as possible, then lay off a little bit, and then that will be worked into the negotiations, despite the fact that in plank 1 of the MoU is all of Lebanese sovereignty in the lands. I think that's going to be some sort of sticky, gluey gray area that will last until the elections come through, while Trump and J.D. Vance try to make it look like they stood up to Netanyahu. That's what I think is going on. So you got to do one thing here over on this computer. Okay, cool. Now, let me get your thoughts, everybody, on this. And I'm going to head on over into Rumble Land and get your thoughts. You let me know what you think you're anticipating on this, and no bets or anything like that. But let's check this out with all the good gang out there as we switch out of this subject real quick. Let's see. Tony Garrett says Israel takes 3 and gives back 2. There you go. Then claims to be the one not taking. Absolutely right. Absolutely right, Tony. Yep. Absolutely. Let's see. To say it many times. As long as you don't ask for peace, you're good. Ask for peace, and you'll promptly be killed. MoE. Yeah, it's really something else. Tony's just up above here. Okay. Oh, they're talking about the David Knight show. Yeah, the David Knight show was great this morning. Really, really good. And Birdhouse has a cut from Rat. Nice. Very good stuff from Rat. All right. Yes, indeed. All right. Now let's get right back to some of the other information. I want to give you some of the things that actually have been happening inside Lebanon and Gaza. Here's a big question. What do you think? The Cradle has this. This, I think, is interesting. And I put on the headline, an act of justice. The 4th commander of a battalion that killed Hind Rajab, that little girl, remember, who was on the phone calling for help? He's been killed. Yep. The killing of Lieutenant Colonel Dor Gedalia Ben Simhon, commander of the Israeli military's 52nd Battalion of the 401st Armored Brigade in southern Lebanon, he went from Gaza over to Lebanon, has renewed scrutiny of the unit responsible for the killing of 6-year-old Palestinian girl Hind Rajab in Gaza. Ben Simhon was killed alongside 3 other Israeli soldiers after their tank was targeted in southern Lebanon, according to the Israeli military. The 52nd Battalion came under international scrutiny when Hind Rajab was killed in Gaza City in January 2024, when Israeli forces deliberately attacked the vehicle carrying her and 6 relatives with hundreds of bullets. Rajab survived the initial attack and remained trapped inside the car while speaking with emergency dispatchers. An ambulance sent to rescue her was struck, of course, killing the 2 paramedics inside. Her body was recovered 12 days later. An Al Jazeera investigation published in October identified former 52nd Battalion Commander Daniel Ayla and 401st Brigade Commander Colonel Beni Ahron among the officers involved in the killing of Rajab, her relatives, and the ambulance crew. In May of 2025, the Belgium-based Hind Rajab Foundation filed a complaint with the International Criminal Court against Ela and Ahron, accusing them of war crimes. According to the Times of Israel, Ben Simon is the 4th commander of the 52nd Battalion to be killed or wounded since the start of Israel's wars in Gaza and Lebanon. The outlet reported that Ayla was wounded in Gaza in July 2024 and succeeded by Lieutenant Colonel Yehuda Shalev, who was seriously injured in October that year. Another battalion commander was later wounded in southern Lebanon before Ben Simon took command. Channel 14 previously reported that Ayla had led the battalion on 3 separate occasions since October 2023. What do you think of that, everybody? What do you think? I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do you think there's a form of justice going on there? And let's see, we've got a number of people. You let me know. I'll leave it to you guys to leave the comments inside there, and we'll go back and check for you in just a little while. All right, now let's get to final thoughts on Gaza to wrap this up. And then we got some big news about Russia. Not so big news. Zbigniew Brzezinski. Here is Gaza information report. Israeli forces have killed 238 children. I'm going to go over to X on this one because there's a lot of detail here. 238 children and 111 women since agreeing to a ceasefire last October, according to a report shared by the Palestinian side with mediators and obtained by Dropsite News. Now, those are women and children. The overall total is much bigger, of course. Israeli attacks have killed 1,011 Palestinians since the ceasefire was announced, and wounded 3,173 since the ceasefire was announced in October. Thursday saw 11 reported violations, 4 Palestinians killed and 8 wounded. Did you hear Donald Trump and J.D. Vance talking about that? No. Curious, isn't it? Israeli military vehicles advanced near Husni Mosque, east of Al-Maghzi camp, and heavy live fire and excavation activity amid heavy live fire. Israeli forces carried out large-scale demolitions of Bani Sulia, east of Khan Yunis. Israeli warships opened fire and launched projectiles off the coast of Al-Nusrat. A woman was wounded by Israeli gunfire in southern Khan Yunis. Fisherman Mohammed Jalal Abdel-Kuharn was critically wounded by Israeli naval fire off of the coast, and more and more. Since the ceasefire took effect, Israel has carried out over 3,323 ceasefire violations, including 1,481 airstrikes and shelling attacks. Why aren't J.D. Vance and Donald Trump speaking about all those violations? I thought those were important to them. Well, perhaps they'd like to shape the narrative. Let's get into free speech now, my friends.